News Now update. We're kicking these off by playing this Ted Cruz, Carly Fiorina press conference. This happened about an hour ago. Carly and Ted both addressing the media this morning. We're going to go ahead and play this for you now. Let's hear what they have to say.
Country with real policy solutions to bring jobs back to America, to bring manufacturing jobs back to the state of Indiana, to raise wages for working men and women, to expand opportunity for young people. At this point, the two critical issues are, number one, positive solutions to jobs, freedom, and security, and number two, unity. We are seeing the Republican Party unite behind this campaign this week. I announced my vice presidential nominee, Carly Fiorina, an incredibly well-respected business leader, someone who rose from being a secretary all the way to being the CEO of the largest technology company in the world, the first woman CEO of a Fortune 20 company in history. Carly is someone who has shattered glass ceilings her entire life. She is someone that is ready to step in and lead and to be an integral part of this team, providing a vision to bring jobs back to America, to raise wages, to expand opportunity, to turn around the disaster of the Obama-Clinton economy, and also to defend the Constitution and Bill of Rights and to keep America safe, to defeat radical Islamic terrorism. We need a commander-in-chief who is up to the task, who understands the threats facing this world, and is prepared to do everything necessary to keep America safe. Carly.
Well, thank you. I was so delighted to be in Indianapolis when I accepted with great humility and pride, both at the same time, the offer to serve as Ted Cruz's running mate. I think we are engaged in a fight for the soul of our party. I think values and principles and policies actually matter. And I don't think you can just slap an R on your jersey and say that you're a Republican, much less a conservative. Donald Trump doesn't represent me, doesn't represent my party, and I don't think he represents the people of the Hoosier State. And both he and Hillary Clinton will be disastrous.
All right, everyone, we're actually going to cut out of this, take you live to Indiana. We are expecting the governor to make a big announcement. He's expected to endorse Ted Cruz. We're going to go ahead and take that to you live. We're going to go ahead and put this press conference in the upper right-hand corner, though, so you don't miss it.
Cityway and YMCA at Cityway.
And for our nation, and the Hoosier State is right at that crossroads.
So is Governor Pence going to endorse you today?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. I did see the tweet that Greg Garrison sent out of a major announcement coming on his show at 12:06 p.m. today. I know I'm going to be listening. I would encourage other folks to listen as well. You know, I will say this. I have tremendous respect for Governor Mike Pence. He has been an incredible leader for the state of Indiana. You know, he's really demonstrated that when you cut taxes, when you reduce regulations, the result is that jobs follow. We've seen jobs, we've seen private sector jobs growing in Indiana. Even as the rest of the country has been suffering, Indiana has seen remarkable growth. Imagine how much better the job growth would be in Indiana if you didn't have the federal government like an 800-pound weight holding down job creation, if you didn't have the federal government driving jobs overseas, jobs like the jobs at Carrier that are going to Mexico because of the Obama administration's taxes and regulations driving jobs overseas. I think Governor Mike Pence is an optimistic, positive, unifying force, a strong leader who I respect. You know, when he was in Congress, he was a strong leader in Congress, standing up and defending conservative principles, defending the Constitution. And as governor, he's been an extraordinary governor. And so I look forward with anticipation to seeing whatever announcement he makes today just after noon.
Just briefly, aside from elections and all that stuff,
Yeah.
this is a full-time job. And things have gone pretty well. We had a big storm yesterday, and some people, first responders, did some great stuff. Just give me the thumbnail of what's been going on.
Yeah, couldn't be more proud of the first responders. Yesterday we had an F1. They told me this morning it was on the ground for about 150 yards. We had some property damage, but thankfully no one was hurt. But this is the time of the year to be vigilant, and I'm grateful that everyone was on top of it in the Zionsville area yesterday, and I'm proud of that. But it's a very exciting time in the life of our state. I mean, we're at record employment. We have more Hoosiers going to work than ever before. I can tell you there's a big jobs announcement coming again here in central Indiana next week. And I think it's all a result of the fact that we've been doing the right things in the right way, balanced budgets, cutting taxes, making the right investments in education and infrastructure. And it's really creating an environment where we're on pace to set another record for investment. And on the education front, you know, we put that I-STEP test in the rearview mirror. People will be reading in the paper in the morning. We have an incredible group of educators that we've appointed to examine how we can have a shorter and more reliable test. We got to have accountability. We, as you know, we test our kids every week. We can test our schools every year, but we're going to work with Nicole Fama, who's going to chair that committee, and a great group that's going to help us craft a test that parents and teachers and people all across Indiana will be confident in.
Been educating kids in public school for a little over 40 years, so I'm glad to see that taking off. Okay, you've spoken to the candidates.
I have.
You've had a chance to think your way through this. Who are you voting for in the presidential primary?
Well, let me first say, this is a very exciting time for Indiana, isn't it? I mean, to have presidential candidates, frankly, in both political parties traveling all across the Hoosier state, to be hearing from and seeing Hoosiers all over the national media, I think is a thrill. I think the last time this happened in the Republican Party, I think I was a junior in high school down in Columbus. And so we really celebrate that. I'm grateful that all the candidates are coming through Indiana and dedicating the time and energy they are. But it's clear this is a time for choosing. And all of America is looking to Indiana to make a choice. I have met with all three of the candidates as of about Tuesday of this week. And I want to say clearly, I like and respect all three of the Republican candidates in the field. I particularly want to commend Donald Trump, who I think has given voice to the frustration of millions of working Americans with a lack of progress in Washington, D.C. And I'm also particularly grateful that Donald Trump has taken a strong stand for Hoosier jobs. When we saw jobs in the carrier company abruptly announced leaving Indiana, not for another state, but for Mexico, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for his voice in the national debate. And let me say, I've come to my decision about who I'm supporting, and I'm not against anybody, but I will be voting for Ted Cruz in the upcoming Republican primary.
You've got some, well, you were there at the same time for a little while. You know him personally. You know his education. You know his experience and his background and his constitutional roots. What is it that animates you to look in his direction the way that you do?
Well, it's a great question. You know, as you know, I'm a Reagan conservative. I literally, when I was a teenager, I was active in Democrat politics. And then I started hearing the voice of that former California governor who articulated an agenda of principles of less government, less taxes, traditional values, and a strong military. And I was drawn to the Republican Party. And throughout my career in Washington, D.C., and now here as governor of Indiana, those have been the principles that have really animated my service. And I've sought to support them at every turn, but also I've looked for opportunities to support men and women who have the courage to stand on those Reagan principles. And I see Ted Cruz as a principled conservative who's dedicated his career to advocating the Reagan agenda, and I'm pleased to support him. Greg, you know from my career, I know a little bit about taking on the big spenders in Washington, D.C. I was doing that more than a decade ago when we saw runaway federal spending on both parties. And I really admire the way Ted Cruz has been willing to stand up for taxpayers in opposing runaway spending, deficits, and debt, calling for and leading on repealing Obamacare. And I also have to tell you, I'm very impressed with Ted Cruz's devotion and knowledge of the Constitution of the United States, of the freedoms that are enshrined there in our Bill of Rights, from our liberties to our Second Amendment. And of course, I appreciate his strong and unwavering stand for the sanctity of life. But, you know, it's for those reasons and just as much in support of the principles that have always animated my public service that I'm voting for Ted Cruz in the upcoming Republican primary.
You know, I see the work that a person in your spot's got to go through to come to that call, even if you kind of got it in your gut in the first place. And I know that you just were able to finally meet with Governor Kasich, our neighboring governor, this week. But your mention of these principles as what drive you, they're fine. A lot of people have said they liked them. And we know a whole bunch of them that forgot about that when they got to Washington. What is it about Senator Cruz that you think says to you, he says it, I believe it, and he's going to do it when he's up there in the bright lights?
Well, I just think the man has shown the courage of his convictions. It's not a popular thing in Washington, D.C. to take on the leadership of your own party. I know that firsthand. I did it when I was there. I opposed runaway federal spending, whether it was a Republican administration or Congress or whether a Democrat administration, and he's been willing to do that. But let me be very clear. I respect the right and the views of every Hoosier in making their determination in the upcoming primary election. And I urge every Hoosier to make up their own mind. But for me, I've always thought that to lead is to choose. And here at this time of choosing, when people all across America are looking to Indiana to make a decision, I just wanted to make my decision known. And but let me be very, very clear on this, Greg. Whoever wins the Republican nomination for president of the United States, I'm going to work my heart out to get elected this fall. Indiana needs a partner in the White House in our prosperity. You know, I mentioned all the good news in Indiana. We're at record employment, more Hoosiers working than ever before. We have balanced budgets, record investment in education and infrastructure. But how much more we could do if we had a Republican administration working with a Republican Congress. I get very excited about Indiana here in our bicentennial year, the potential in our third century if we have someone working in Washington, D.C. for us instead of against us. So I just encourage every Hoosier to examine all these candidates as I have, listen carefully to all of their positions, make their decision, exercise their right to vote this coming Tuesday, if not before. And at the end of the day, I'm very confident that our party is going to come together around our nominee, whoever that might be, and we're going to deliver a great victory for all the people of the United States this fall.
I'm in recollection of a phrase from a conservative from a long time ago. Barry Goldwater's theme, he got beat, but he said, "A choice, not an echo." And what I see out of what's happened this last 8 years, and frankly, way too much in the 8 before that, too many echoes. And everything was the answer to every question was more money. We've all seen it in our pocketbooks. We've seen it in the savings accounts that are gone. We've seen it in our inability to buy equipment to grow our own businesses, to hire more folks. And it ain't funny. It's awful. And you mentioned, I think, on the air, and as you've said to me as well, my choice is, first of all, whoever can beat Hillary Clinton. So let's talk about that just for a minute. I know you got to get out of here, but just very quickly, how do you see a general election with Ted Cruz and Carly Fiorina versus Mrs. Clinton and whoever she chooses?
Well, I'm for anybody but Hillary and Bernie Sanders. I mean, I believe that the course of this last administration would only be magnified in wrong liberal policies under either one of the Democrat candidates. And so that's why I said, I'm expressing my support today. But after voters make all their choices between now and June the 7th, and our party settles on a nominee, on a team, on a ticket, I promise you, I'm going to work my heart out for that team and make sure that we deliver a great victory. Because, at the end of the day, it is about the principles that have laid the foundation for this nation's prosperity and exceptionalism. It's about making sure that those Republican principles are put into practice in the next administration, and that we get serious about tackling this mountain range of debt, rebuilding our military, standing up for the principles of federalism, where we don't just cut government spending in Washington, D.C., but we have leadership in Washington, D.C. that understands that most of the cure for what ails this country is going to happen more in our nation's state capitals than it ever will in our nation's capital. And so applying the principles of the 10th Amendment and federalism and divesting power and resources out of Washington, D.C. back to the states, that's all the key. And for me, Greg, and I can tell you're hearing me on this, for me this is about choosing between three good men, all of whom I like and respect, and identifying that individual who I think best articulates and would best advance the principles that have made our prosperity possible, and that for me is Ted Cruz.
Governor, I know the clock is ticking and you got lots of stuff to do. Thanks for coming by. We appreciate it so much. God bless. We'll catch up soon.
Thank you.